Have you ever looked at certain biblical figures and been fascinated by them? I was reflecting on the first reading. God calls Abraham. Think of this, the God of the universe, who has at this point in time not really revealed himself in a divine revelation, is now unveiling himself anew. Of course, he revealed himself to Adam and Eve and had an easy fellowship with them, but that closeness between God and humanity kind of faded. And then at an opportune time, God chooses this man, Abraham. And I would be so fascinated to have known Abraham, to see how he lived his life. He's 99 in the first reading. 99. God appears to him and says, I want to make a covenant with you. I wonder, what was Abraham living like? Part of me wonders if he had been a man of great searching for truth and goodness. And if perhaps that was part of the reason that God chose him, that kings, nations would descend from him. Now, this word covenant, it's important for us because we live in the time of the new and eternal covenant. And a covenant is not an exchange of goods and services. It's an exchange between one person, one party, and another of their very personhood, their very being. God makes this covenant with Abraham, says, I will be your God, and you and your generations will follow me. You will belong to me. Let's belong to each other. And now Jesus has raised up our life, this covenantal relationship we have with God, to a whole new pitch because of what he does for us in the Eucharist. In the Eucharist, at the words of consecration, Jesus says to you and me, this is my body given up for you. And he says, especially with the precious blood, this is the blood of the new and eternal covenant. You and I, through baptism, are part of this new and eternal covenant, the final covenant for all eternity. And there's a word in Greek that expresses how a covenant should be lived out. It's a word kenosis. Kenosis is another way of saying a total pouring out of self, total self-emptying, like Christ emptied himself to become a slave to save us. Each person in a covenant should live a kenosis. And so, when we come to Mass, Jesus gives himself totally to us, and all through our day, he gives us graces and protection and blessings and guidance and wisdom and answers to our questions that we need in today's time so much. But he invites us to live our part of the covenant in these concrete historical circumstances, to give ourselves back to him through this kenosis. This is what Mass is supposed to be all about. It's really about God giving himself to us and us receiving and giving back our whole being. Our whole being. God gives himself with no limits to you and I. Are you willing to give yourself back to God, an eternal self-offering with no limits? That's what the Mass invites us to do, this new covenant, greater than the covenant with Abraham. We have a greater covenant, but it invites a response, a total kenosis. That's what is happening at the Mass every time. And this is important for us in this time of the coronavirus because we could get tempted to look at lesser things, as important as they are, but we need to remember this is the most important. It's our covenant with God that will strengthen us through these times. And so may we respond to God's call to give our whole selves in a kenosis of self-giving love, in the concrete duties of our day, every day, for the rest of our lives, imitating the faithfulness of Abraham.